thank you for joining me here in my little corner of the world, of the internet, where I'm here to help you relax, unwind, and especially give you tingles, 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 tingles. It's been a little while since I've done anything like this, but this particular series of videos has been a long time coming. Especially this one right here. This one I've actually tried doing. I can't even tell you how many times. It's been something that I've mulled around in my head, have planned over and over, and have tried recording even before. And I was never really satisfied with it. But, in my time away, I have been realizing that, things don't have to be perfect. And this isn't about the production value. This isn't about how y'all see this video, per se. But this is about me sharing my love and interest of the arts. And I'm kind of excited to be doing something like this. So, as a formal introduction, welcome to Musical March, where I will be several times this month recording two parts, two videos, where one video is something like this, a ramble style, with some light triggers, talking about a musical, its summary, and some of the things I enjoy about it, why I enjoy it. And a second video coming out a little bit later in the week of me doing a cover of a song from the musical. And today I figured, why not kick it off the way that my love of musical theater kicked off, truly, all those many, many, many years ago, sitting in my living room at home with my parents, probably being no more than 5 or 6, maybe 7. And my dad turned on a little movie called Little Shop of Horrors. And it's always held a special place in my heart. I've always remembered this silly little movie about a talking plant that eats people, and all of the fun music that went along with it, which was awesome, to me especially. I would say it's probably my first ever non-Disney musical, and because I've known about it my entire life, it definitely holds a special place in my heart. So, without further ado, I'm gonna talk a little bit about it. Little Shop of Horrors itself is a musical that first premiered off Broadway in 1982 and was created by Howard Ashman with music by Alan Menken. And if you know those names, those two names are very, very special to anybody that enjoys Disney, especially Disney Renaissance 90s Disney, because those two are the reason that we have many, many of the movies that we grew up with during that time. In fact, shortly after this, And shortly after the 1986 version of the movie of Little Shop of Horrors came out, Alan Menken and Howard Ashman would go to work with Disney on The Little Mermaid, followed by Beauty and the Beast, and followed by Aladdin. I believe they also both did The Hunchback of Notre Dame, and I know that there's another one in there somewhere that I'm not thinking of, but those are the most important ones. Without The Little Mermaid especially, we wouldn't have had the Disney Renaissance, which is absolutely crazy to think, and it all started with them working together on this project right here, Little Shop of Horrors. The show itself is actually based on a 1960s dark comedy flick called The Little Shop of Horrors, which is public domain, and I definitely recommend you check it out because it is absolutely the goofiest thing ever. You see, I knew he was going to do this. What do you want, man? Come here. Oh, come here. Yes, you come here. As you all know, this is my boy Toby. He's a sweet little guy that loves being included in everything. Say hello, little man. Yeah. He's a sweet man. He's my little guy. Would you like to say hello? Do you have things to say? It is based off of the 1960 dark comedy, The Little Shop of Horrors, public domain. Check it out. I actually watched it on YouTube for the first time, probably within the past 6 to 8 years, something like that. I thought it was a blast. So if you enjoy the musical, I would definitely check out the movie, the original movie. I will say it's probably not the craziest as far as production quality goes. It's said that the movie itself was recorded in about 2 days, I believe. And the director wanted to try to make a movie with as cheaply and as quickly as he possibly could, whether that was as a bet or as a challenge. But he did it, and it's absolutely hysterical. And it's interesting to see what things carried over from that 1960s, that 1960 movie to the stage play. What is Little Shop of Horrors? What is it about? Well, it's about a young gardener by the name of Seymour Krelborn, who lives in Skid Row, a very rough side of town, very dejected side of town where everybody's broke and lives day to day trying to get by. We start with him in the flower shop with his boss, Mr. Mushnick, who is really, really, really hard on him, and Audrey, his coworker and crush. The flower shop isn't in the greatest state between where it's at and how they aren't really getting any kind of business and haven't gotten any business in a very, very long time. So Seymour introduces the idea of a plant in the window, an interesting plant. And Seymour brings up a plant that he has been working on for a little while, which he has named the Audrey 2, after the coworker that he has a crush on. And it looks a little bit like the plants behind me that you see. These are both very precious to me. The one here is actually a gift from a friend of my own from work who made some and ended up bringing me in one. So shout out to Rick. I love him dearly, and it's been a while since I've talked to him. I hope he's doing well. But it's a cute little plant, as you can see. And then this little one behind me, hard to see, is actually kind of a Lego one that I was able to put together. Shout out to my mommy. She got that for me for, I want to say, my birthday last year. And, I had to put it together immediately. It's awesome. Yeah, it's really cute. If I didn't have the cat in my lap right now, I would be showing you a little bit closer. Yeah, little man, you're a good boy. You're allowed to be here. You belong. Continuing on. Seymour brings this plant up, puts it in the window, and all of a sudden it gets all of this attention. There are people walking by that stop into the store just to see the plant and end up getting flowers and things. So business is booming. But immediately we have an issue where the plant starts withering even after the sudden success. Because it's supposed to be a fly trap of some sort, but Seymour can't figure out what it eats. Well, one night he accidentally cuts his hand and finds out that it eats blood. And he starts to nurse it with his own blood for a little while. And it starts to grow. The flower shop starts to thrive. And great things start to happen. For a second, we stop to meet the dentist, who is Audrey's current boyfriend. And he is not a great guy. He delights in the torture and pain of his, call them victims, but his patients, as he is a dentist. And he likes to get high off of his own supply, as it were, and likes to take the giggle gas for himself, the nitrous oxide for himself, but not give it to his patients, which is really goofy and crazy. But he also has those tendencies, takes those tendencies to Audrey and hits her as well. And it's really sad. There's one day that she comes back from being with him, and her arm is in a cast, and she ends up thinking about that and talking about how she wishes that she had better, somebody sweeter like Seymour, and could leave the streets of Skid Row to live somewhere better, somewhere that's green. Specifically for the time, we think of Levitt towns, those cookie cutter towns where every house looks exactly the same. And the idea of the American dream is alive and well. And nothing's ever bad, nothing ever goes wrong. All sorts of things like that. But that's her dream, generally. She's a little bit of a ditzy character, depending on which version of it you are watching. But that gives her a little bit more depth, and you start to really empathize with her. You really start to see her as the victim of circumstance that she truly is, especially considering the time. The 1960s weren't very kind to women anyway. So after a little bit of time, the plant grows and grows, and eventually it starts wilting again because it's not getting fed enough food. Seymour has absolutely spent himself. He has barely enough blood for himself, is passing out all over the place, and is having a really hard time feeding the plant. And the plant speaks. "Feed me," it says. Seymour is dumbfounded. He is absolutely surprised with this crazy plant talking to him, but the plant gets pushy and says that it wants food now and it can only take blood. So, during this time where the plant is trying to convince him to feed him, potentially a victim, the dentist comes in with Audrey and ends up hitting Audrey, setting off Seymour, and setting into motion the rest of the show, really, where Seymour starts to become a darker, kind of more murdery kind of person in order to feed the plant, to keep his dreams alive, and to potentially, maybe, hopefully, get the girl. So he goes into the office, and instead of killing Orin Scrivello himself, the odd dentist ends up getting trapped inside of his own little makeshift nitrous oxide machine. There's this makeshift machine that the dentist puts over himself to feed him more of the nitrous oxide. It ends up getting stuck, and instead of helping, cat hair. Instead of helping, Seymour essentially lets the dentist die and takes him, chops him up into little pieces, and feeds him to Audrey 2. Now, Audrey 2 starts growing even bigger, even more massive, and the flower shop thrives. They're getting even more calls, getting calls from the Rose Bowl and huge names in all different places to get plants, different garden variety plants. In this time, during this time, Audrey feels bad because Orin is gone, but she's kind of glad that he is gone. So Seymour puts the moves on her, and they finally end up together, which is a really cute, really sweet scene. Eventually, our good friend, Mr. Mushnick, the flower shop owner, ends up getting kind of wise to what's going on, seeing little clues, like little red dots on the floor, Seymour with Audrey, and a bloodied dentist uniform out in the trash can. So he's put the pieces together, figuring out that Seymour is killing people, but not entirely sure what exactly he's doing with them. So, in an attempt to throw Mr. Mushnick off of his trail, he ultimately feeds Mr. Mushnick to Audrey 2, to keep his own dreams alive and to try to keep Audrey happy. And it ends up benefiting Seymour in the long run because he ends up getting these crazy massive offers, a lecturing tour, a section of Life magazine, a TV show of his own, anything he could have, all for him. All he has to do is keep feeding the plant. Well, Seymour is racked with guilt. He hates that he has to keep feeding people to this plant. And eventually says that he will no longer be feeding the plant. the plant keeps telling him to feed me, and Seymour keeps refusing. So finally, Seymour gives in, says, fine, I'll get you some food, but runs out to the store to go buy some food for the plant. And the plant ends up doing something a little dastardly in convincing Audrey to come in and to feed the plant, but not in the way that Audrey assumes, because Audrey thinks it just needs a little bit of water. Well, the plant ends up wrapping its vines around Audrey and starts to eat her. Seymour comes in time to be able to pull her out, and then this is where the movie and the musical end up splitting. And it's really interesting, the history behind that. It's kind of silly, because the original way that the show ends, Audrey ends up dying in Seymour's arms, and Seymour feeds Audrey to himself, and it absolutely destroys him, especially after Seymour finally realizes what all of this was all about. He figures out that it was about world conquest. The plant was trying to become bigger than hula hoops, to be able to send cuttings and snippets of itself around the world to be able to eat everybody on the planet. Seymour comes and tries to take care of the plant in any way that he can, eventually jumping inside with a machete. Gets eaten himself, and the machete gets spat out, leaving the plant to do as it will and terrorize the world. Really bleak ending, but it makes sense. It's a cautionary tale about greed. The plant is literally green. And the bigger and greener that it gets, the more and more rich and famous that Seymour gets, the more awful things Seymour has to do to keep Audrey 2 fed. And for Seymour, it ends up costing him everything, including his own life. So it's a cautionary tale about watching out for the things that might seem too good to be true. They may offer you fortune and fame, love and money, and instant acclaim, but whatever they offer you, don't feed the plants. Stay true to yourself. Don't let yourself be consumed by the greed, or the greed will eventually consume you. To jump back to where the divergence happens, as it were, Seymour takes Audrey out of the plant, and Audrey ends up being okay. And Seymour goes back in after figuring out what the plant wanted. And after this big, crazy, cool, one of my favorite scenes in any movie ever, one of my favorite sequences in any movie ever, is this one song sang by Levi Stubbs. It's Mean Green Mother from Outer Space. I'm sure a couple of you might have heard of that song, listen to that song. It's so good. And the scene itself, the plant and all of the different puppetry and things at work, messing with Seymour, playing around with him, destroying the shop, all these different things culminating in Seymour eventually taking some exposed wiring to the plant, making the plant blow up. And Seymour finally gets to leave Skid Row with Audrey happily ever after, ? Because there ends up being a little tiny Audrey 2 in their front lawn that they don't see. So who knows what happens? I love that sequence so much in the movie. It is hands down that is the one thing I've always remembered. I remember two things about that movie always that have always stayed in my head rent free, and that's Feed Me and Mean Green Mother from Outer Space, just because of how big and crazy the entire sequence ends up being. Actually, speaking of Feed Me, I have to show this. This is something I wanted to show a little bit early on, but Toby's been in my lap the entire time. This is actually a little gift I got from my boss. A little Audrey 2 Feed Me plant. Pin. And she ended up going and seeing the show off Broadway herself and ended up getting that little pin for me, and I'm forever grateful for that. Especially because I've seen the show. I want to say I've only seen it probably like 3 or 4 times as far as like live productions go. A couple in local community theaters around me, but then a couple of years ago I went and saw it off Broadway myself, and that was one of the greatest performances of any show I've ever seen. It was small and intimate, which was really nice. But despite, how small and kind of intimate it felt, it really helped the show itself. It really helped you feel closer to the characters. You were practically right there. They were right in your face the entire time, and it was a hoot. Especially the man that played Orin DDS. The actor's name was Christian Borle, and I know him from playing Willy Wonka in the new Charlie and the Chocolate Factory musical. Some people may know him from his time on Legally Blonde, or I know that there was another show that he did, but I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. But regardless, it was an amazing show, and he stole the show every time that he was on the stage. Some other kind of things I want to mention about this show kind of tie into some of the technical and production aspects of it, and the character relationships. As far as the production goes, specifically, it's about the Audrey 2. It's a series of different puppets. Most of them are pretty simple as far as things go. They're mostly just like hand puppets. But looking at the musical itself, there are 4 puppets. There's the small puppet that kind of looks like this guy right here, one of these guys right here. That kind of just snaps and tries to suck on blood. It's a very simple, small hand puppet with somebody underneath a table controlling the mouth, and then eventually growing out of it. The second one is another hand puppet that Seymour himself takes control of. And that scene ends up being absolutely hilarious, because while Seymour's trying to go and do his dance routine with the rest of these other cast of characters, the plant has a mind of its own, and while he's off doing this, the plant is off trying to eat people. And it's absolutely hilarious to see. The third plant ends up being a plant where you kind of sit down and the person's legs are a couple of the vines so that it can kind of move around like that. But then the upper body is inside of the giant portion of it. And they're controlling the mouth, trying to keep up with the person that is doing the voice of Audrey 2, keeping the two separated. And that one is probably my most favorite of the 4 puppets, just because it's this super, despite how kind of constricting it might look, and I'm sure it kind of feels, it still is super mobile. And I gotta give props to anybody who ends up being the puppeteer inside of that version of Audrey 2, because that looks insane. And like, this show is one of my personal dream shows. I would love to be Seymour in this show personally. But I would also love to be one of the puppeteers for the Audrey 2. I'm not like a crazy puppeteer or anything. I just have like a little bit of experience from a show I did back when I was in college. But regardless of that, it's a work of art, and you can't help but just be so enthused the entire time and so energetic along with the plant, because the plant itself is just so captivating. The plant itself steals the show. It really does. It despite the show being mostly about Seymour, it all ends up coming back to the plant. The plant is the thing that draws you in, because it's just so entertaining to watch. And then finally, in pretty much the entirety of Act 2, there's this giant puppet. Doesn't seem to have quite as much range of movement, but it's still absolutely massive, and it's so big that a person can fit inside of it, which is done on purpose, because it ends up eating 3 different people completely whole, in Mr. Mushnick, Audrey, and Seymour. So it's a marvel. It's a marvel of puppetry, and it's something that I didn't realize was as interesting and cool as it was until many years later. And some of these things I actually ended up learning in a video that I watched recently. Oh man, hold on. Now we gotta look this up. It's Wait in the Wings. Wait in the Wings made a video about the production of Little Shop of Horrors recently. It's been up for only a couple of days, so please go watch that. They put so much work into it. They were able to talk to a couple of the different members of the cast, of the current cast, members of the cast prior, talk to the man that actually created the puppets themselves. Please go watch that. It's so interesting to see what went into originally getting this show off of the ground. And especially for me, I have watched this show many times over the years. I've watched the movie. I can't even say how many times I've watched the movie. But it's really interesting to learn these little bits and pieces about the show as I've gone on. Something else that I ended up really enjoying in the show was watching the dynamics between Seymour and the different characters, but specifically Seymour and Audrey 2. Because Seymour is definitely this nerdy, kind of closed off individual who fears a lot and has a lot of anxieties and worries on his mind, because he cares so deeply about Audrey and wants the best for her. As the musical goes on, we watch Seymour become this kind of more confident, still super sweet and caring, but also manipulative. The Audrey almost acts as the angel on his shoulder. She doesn't know any of the things that are going on with the plant at all. But she still wants nothing but good things for Seymour at the end of the day. That's really sweet to watch. And it's the same for Seymour, because everything that he ends up doing is, of course, very selfish, greedy. It's for himself, but ultimately it's also to give Audrey the life that she's wanted and never been able to have because of how they've come up in the streets of Skid Row. So it's really sweet watching their interactions, especially toward the beginning, where Seymour is very shy and wants to interact with Audrey more, but between her being dating this awful guy and Seymour himself, not being very confident in himself, we get to see a lot of something of an unrequited love, as it were, despite both characters having deep feelings for each other. As I said earlier, we get to see Audrey evolve as a character during the show as well, where she starts out feeling like she doesn't deserve very many good things. She doesn't deserve a sweet guy like Seymour, but, she kind of has this certain attitude about her that she is just trying to survive the streets, trying to survive in whatever way she can in this little low-income area. But the thing that ends up giving her a little bit more depth are her dreams, the things that she wishes for. Depending on the version that you're watching, she ends up kind of being more of a ditzy kind of character, being a timid, kind of scared character that just kind of does as she's told, especially by the doctor. But in some of the newer productions, like in the one that I saw off Broadway a couple years ago, she was more of a hardened character. Although she was in this relationship with Oren and had to kind of be a little submissive and things like that, she was kind of a no shit taking character. And you saw that she was mostly mean and tough, in a way, especially, and it played really well against Seymour's more timid feeling and acting kind of character. But then the song Somewhere That's Green humanizes her, gives her more depth, shows that she doesn't want what she currently has. She doesn't want to survive. She doesn't want to be timid, or she doesn't want to have to be this hard character. She wants good things. She wants something sweet. She wants to be somewhere that's green. And something interesting about that song, of course, how I said they wrote The Little Mermaid. Well, the ending of that song matches the ending of Part of That World. Far from Skid Row, I dream we'll go somewhere that's green. Versus the end of Part of Your World. Out of the sea, wish I could be part of that world. As you can tell, it's very similar. So it kind of circles back around to the the idea that without Little Shop, none of the Disney Renaissance films or anything that we know and love today would have ever existed. Which is awesome to think about and consider. It's kind of scary to think about and consider, because this show ended up being as important as it was. But I think the last thing I wanted to kind of talk about was Audrey 2 itself as a character. Just because, like I said, the plant truly steals the show. Anytime that it interacts with Seymour, it's so interesting, because the plant has kind of like a smooth talking attitude where it really conjures up dreams in Seymour, conjures up the ideas and dreams and things that Seymour thinks about occasionally, and wanting to get out of Skid Row and other things like that. But as soon as the plant really plants the seed of potentially getting Audrey for Seymour, that's where everything changes. That's where Seymour finally starts to adopt more of those villainous characteristics, which can almost feel like a villain talking to their sidekick in a way, but in a sweet kind of way. The plant itself, its style of music is different from a lot of the other styles of music in the show. Something I haven't really discussed was the music itself, and that's one of the biggest reasons I love musical theater is the music itself. Being based on 1960s movie, everything surrounding this show itself is also about 1960s themed. The urchins in the street, a couple of the three different characters that are kind of like the muses of from Hercules, they are named after 50s and 60s groups, women's groups, and they've kind of got this jazzy R&B kind of feel. Audrey 2 also has some of that kind of bluesy, jazzy kind of feel, but then also has a tinge of rock, especially when you're looking at the song Feed Me, specifically, or Feed Me or Get It. And a little bit later on in the show, when during the final confrontation, that rock feel comes back out, and it really makes it feel like you're traveling back in time to the 60s and experiencing this show in that way. There are a couple of songs that I feel probably go against that a little bit. Probably specifically Somewhere That's Green, in its kind of sweetness and kind of more of that traditional musical theater feel and style that I Want song. Not necessarily feeling like it's from any particular kind of time period. But it fits so well in the grand scheme of the rest of the show. It's a beautiful, beautiful piece. And I think at this point I've yapped as much as I can about the show. I'm sure I could yap more, but that's about all I've got for right now. So I would like to thank you for joining me today here in my little corner of the world and of the internet. I hope you're doing well, homie. Things can be a little crazy out there. We can be tempted by very scary things. But we got to remember, don't feed the plants. Don't feed into it. So, I do want to thank you for joining me here. I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day, week, month, year, whatever. And I hope you check out my video a little bit later on this week. and let me know how you feel about this, how you feel about the cover. And also let me know what you thought about my previous cover if you checked it out, because I very much so enjoy doing music and musical theater, talking about it. And in my free time, I like to sing. So if you'd like more of that kind of stuff, let me know as well. Otherwise, again, thank you for checking me out, and I hope to catch you later. Peace out, homie.